The massive ship appeared in Earth's sky on a Tuesday morning. It was so big that it blocked out the sun over half of North America. The ship looked like a giant metal cathedral with sharp edges and glowing purple lights running along its sides. People on the ground stopped their cars and pointed up at the sky. Some took pictures with their phones while others called the police. Inside the ship, Admiral Crickstall stood on the bridge wearing his ceremonial armor. His scales were dark green with golden patterns that showed his high rank in the Zephyrian Empire. He had conquered 17 different worlds in his long career. Each time was the same. His ships would arrive, he would make his demands, and the primitive species would surrender in fear. "Open communication channels to the planet's leadership," Crickstall ordered his crew. His voice was deep and commanding. "We will give them the standard ultimatum. They have one rotation to surrender or face complete destruction." The communication officer, a younger Zephyrian named Vexstar, worked at his console. "Channel open, Admiral. We are connected to their planetary defense network." Admiral Crickstall straightened his armor and activated the transmission. The screen showed him a small room with plain white walls and fluorescent lights. Behind a simple desk sat a human male in his 30s wearing a wrinkled shirt and tie. The human was drinking coffee from a paper cup and looked tired. "Greetings, primitive inhabitants of the third planet," Admiral Crickstall began in his most intimidating voice. "I am Admiral Crickstall of the mighty Zephyrian Empire. We have conquered worlds across 17 star systems. Your pathetic civilization now faces the same choice as all others before you." The human took another sip of coffee and looked at the screen with tired eyes. "Okay, hold on a second there, big guy. Let me get this straight. You're calling from space, right? And you want to what, exactly? Take over our planet?" Admiral Crickstall was confused. This was not the usual response. Most species begged for mercy or tried to negotiate at this point. "You will surrender your world to the Zephyrian Empire or face total annihilation. Your primitive weapons cannot stand against our advanced technology." The human leaned back in his chair. His name tag read Danny Martinez, Night Shift Coordinator. Danny rubbed his eyes and looked at his watch. "Look, I don't know who set this up, but I'm not falling for it. Is this some kind of prank call? Because I've got real work to do here." "Prank call?" Admiral Crickstall's scales changed color slightly, showing his confusion. "This is no jest, human. We are the Zephyrian Empire. We command the most powerful fleet in the galaxy." Danny laughed and shook his head. "Right? Sure you are. And I'm the president of Earth. Listen, space guy, I handle communications for the UN Night Shift. If you're really aliens, you're going to need to talk to someone way above my pay grade. Do you want me to transfer you to my manager?" The Admiral looked at his crew. They all seemed as confused as he was. In his 200 years of military service, no one had ever asked to speak to his manager. "Transfer? What is this manager? Is this some kind of military title?" "No, man, a manager is just someone who gets paid more than me to deal with weird phone calls," Danny explained. He was starting to enjoy this strange conversation. "But seriously, if you're really from space, you picked a weird time to call. It's 3 a.m. here. Most of our important people are sleeping." Admiral Crickstall felt his confidence slipping. "Sleeping? Your leaders sleep while facing invasion?" "Well, yeah," Danny said. "People need sleep. It's kind of a basic human thing. Look, I can leave a message if you want." "What did you say your name was? Admiral Crease something?" "Crickstall," the Admiral corrected. "Admiral Crickstall of the Eternal Dominion, flagship of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet." Danny wrote something on a piece of paper. "Okay, got it." "And you want to take over our planet because you have better technology, is that right?" "That is correct," Admiral Crickstall said, feeling slightly less intimidating than when he started the conversation. "Huh," Danny said. "Well, I hate to break it to you, but that's not really how things work around here. We've got this thing called international law. You can't just show up and claim a planet. There's paperwork involved, treaties, lots of boring meetings." At that moment, Captain Lisa Bell burst into Danny's office. She was wearing a Space Force uniform and had been monitoring the transmission from the next room. She had been trying not to laugh for the past 10 minutes, but when she heard Danny talking about paperwork, she couldn't help herself. Danny, please tell me you're not trying to handle first contact with aliens by asking them to fill out forms, Lisa said, laughing. Oh, hey, Captain Bell, Danny said. Yeah, this guy says he's from the Zephyrian Empire and wants to take over Earth. I was just explaining how that's not really how we do things. Lisa looked at the screen and saw Admiral Crixtal's confused expression. Admiral, I'm Captain Lisa Bell of the United States Space Force. I've been monitoring this conversation, and I have to say, you picked the wrong planet to try your intimidation tactics on. You dare mock the mighty Zephyrian Empire? Admiral Crixtal demanded. Mock you? Oh no, Admiral, we're not mocking you. We're just confused about why you think showing up with a big ship and making threats is going to work on humans. We've been watching movies about alien invasions for decades. We kind of know how this goes. Admiral Crixtal felt something he had never experienced before in his military career. He felt foolish. Movies? What are these movies? Entertainment, Captain Bell explained. Stories we tell for fun. We have hundreds of stories about aliens coming to Earth. Some are friendly, some are hostile, but they all end the same way. Either the aliens learn to get along with humans or they underestimate US and things go badly for them. This is impossible, Admiral Crixtal said. You are a primitive species. Your technology is thousands of years behind ours. Maybe, Captain Bell said with a smile. But here's the thing, Admiral. We might not have the fanciest technology, but we've got something you apparently don't have. We've got experience dealing with the unexpected. Would you like me to show you around our defenses? I think you might find them interesting. Danny finished writing his message. So, Admiral, do you want me to schedule a meeting with the Secretary General? I should warn you, his calendar is pretty full this week. There's a climate summit on Thursday. Admiral Crixtal looked at his crew again. They all seemed as bewildered as he felt. This was not going according to plan at all. These humans were treating his invasion like a business meeting. They were not afraid. They were not begging for mercy. They were offering him a tour. A tour? He asked weakly. Sure, Captain Bell said. We'll show you what we've got. Fair warning, though, it might not look like much compared to your fancy ship. But sometimes the simple stuff works better than the complicated stuff. You'd be surprised what humans can do with basic tools and a little creativity. The Admiral realized he was no longer in control of this situation. Somehow, in the space of one conversation, his terrifying invasion had become a diplomatic visit. He looked at the two humans on the screen. They seemed genuinely interested in showing him around their planet as if he was a tourist instead of a conquering warlord. Very well, he said finally. We will accept your tour, but do not think this changes anything. The Zephyrian Empire always gets what it wants. Danny finished his coffee and stood up. Well, Admiral, I guess we'll see about that. Welcome to Earth. 3 days later, Admiral Crixtal found himself standing in a large hangar at Edwards Air Force Base in California. He wore his formal diplomatic robes instead of his battle armor, though he still felt very uncomfortable. The humans had insisted on this meeting to show each other their technology. The Admiral thought this would be a perfect chance to prove how superior the Zephyrian Empire really was. Dr. Kevin Park walked into the hangar carrying a toolbox and wearing a lab coat that had coffee stains on it. He was a quantum physicist from MIT, but he looked more like a mechanic than a scientist. Behind him came Dr. Amy Watson, a materials engineer who was wheeling a cart full of what looked like junk from a hardware store. Good morning, Admiral, Dr. Park said cheerfully. Ready to see what human technology can do? Admiral Crixtal gestured to his crew, who began bringing in their equipment. The first item was a plasma weapon that glowed with blue energy. It was sleek and beautiful, made from materials that shimmered like liquid metal. This is a standard Zephyrian plasma rifle. It can cut through any known material and has enough power to level a building. Dr. Watson nodded politely. Very nice. Clean. Design. How often does it break down? Break down? Admiral Crixtal seemed confused. It is Zephyrian technology. It does not break down. Everything breaks down, Dr. Park said. It's just a matter of when and how badly. The Admiral's crew then brought out their shield generator. It was a tall cylinder covered in blinking lights and complex displays. When they activated it, a shimmering blue barrier appeared around it. This personal shield can stop any projectile or energy weapon, the Admiral explained proudly. As if on cue, the shield generator started making strange noises. The lights began flashing in a pattern that was clearly not normal. One of the Zephyrian technicians looked worried and began pressing buttons on the control panel. Dr. Watson said, there's your breakdown. Mind if I take a look? The Zephyrian technician tried several more buttons, but the shield flickered and made even stranger noises. Finally, he stepped back and spoke to the Admiral in their language. Admiral Crickstall's scales turned slightly orange, which Dr. Park had learned meant embarrassment. Our technician says the shield generator is malfunctioning, the Admiral admitted. This is most unusual. It worked perfectly yesterday. Dr. Watson walked over to the machine and looked at it for about 30 seconds. Then she reached into her toolbox and pulled out a roll of silver tape. This might help, she said. What is that? Admiral Crickstall asked. Duct tape, Dr. Watson replied. It's basically magic. She tore off a piece of tape and stuck it over a small crack in the generator's outer casing. The strange noises stopped. The lights returned to their normal pattern. The shield became steady and bright again. The Zephyrian technician stared at the tape in amazement. He ran his scanner over it and looked at the readings with confusion. How did you know to do that? He asked in accented English. The crack was letting air get to the internal circuits, Dr. Watson explained. Your generator works fine in space, but Earth's atmosphere has different pressure. The tape sealed the crack. Problem solved. Admiral Crickstall looked at the small piece of tape that had fixed his advanced technology. This simple adhesive substance repaired our shield generator? Duct tape fixes everything, Dr. Park said. It's like rule number 1 of human engineering. The Admiral's crew brought out their final piece of equipment. It was their faster-than-light communication device, which looked like a crystal sculpture, with metal cables running through it. This allows instant communication across the galaxy, the Admiral said. Trying to regain his dignity, the device worked perfectly, connecting them to a Zephyrian ship in another star system. The Admiral spoke briefly with the ship's captain, then ended the transmission. As you can see, our technology is far beyond anything on your world. Dr. Park walked around the device, looking at it from different angles. It's beautiful, he said, but it looks like it uses a lot of power. Power consumption is not a concern for the Zephyrian Empire, the Admiral replied. Well, it should be, Dr. Park said, because you're wasting about 60% of your energy with this design. The crystal matrix is pretty, but it's not very efficient. He pulled out a small device that looked like it came from a computer store. This is a quantum entanglement communicator. We built it last year. It does the same job as your crystal thing, but it uses 90% less power. The Admiral examined the human device. It was ugly compared to Zephyrian technology, but when Dr. Park demonstrated it, the connection was just as clear and much faster. How is this possible? We don't worry about making things look pretty, Dr. Park explained. We just focus on making them work. At that moment, Carlos Rivera walked into the hangar. He was an engineer who specialized in fixing things that were supposed to be impossible to fix. He took one look at the Zephyrian faster-than-light drive that the crew had brought and shook his head. Who designed this thing? Carlos asked. It's way too complicated. Admiral Crickstall puffed up with pride. That drive was designed by the finest engineers in the Zephyrian Empire. It has taken us across the galaxy for 3 centuries. Yeah, but look at all these extra parts, Carlos said, pointing to various components. Half of this stuff doesn't do anything useful. It's just there to look impressive. He walked over to his own cart and pulled out what looked like spare parts from a car engine. Give me about an hour and I can make this thing 30% more efficient. That is impossible, the Admiral said. Our engineers have spent decades perfecting that design. Your engineers spent decades making it complicated, Carlos replied. Human engineers spend their time making things simple. He started working on the drive, using tools that looked like they belonged in a garage rather than a laboratory. The Zephyrian technicians watched in horror as Carlos removed what they thought were critical components and replaced them with parts that looked like they came from a hardware store. This is madness, one of the technicians whispered. He is destroying our most advanced technology. But when Carlos finished and tested the drive, it worked better than before. The energy readings were higher, the field was more stable, and the whole system ran much quieter. How? Admiral Crickstall asked weakly. Simple, Carlos said. Your people design things to impress other people. We design things to work. When something has to work, you don't add fancy stuff that can break. You just make it do its job. Dr. Watson had been examining the Zephyrian plasma weapon while Carlos worked on the drive. This is a nice weapon, she said, but it has a problem. What problem? The Admiral asked, though he was beginning to dread the answer. It's too perfect, Dr. Watson explained. When something goes wrong with it, you probably have to send it back to the factory, right? It's too complex to fix in the field. The Admiral nodded reluctantly. Our weapons are maintained by certified technicians using specialized equipment. Dr. Watson pulled out a simple rifle from the human equipment. This is an M16. It's been around for decades. A soldier can take it apart and put it back together in the dark. If something breaks, you can fix it with basic tools. Sometimes you can even fix it by hitting it with a rock. She demonstrated by field stripping the rifle in less than 2 minutes, then putting it back together. It's not as advanced as your plasma weapon, but it works anywhere, anytime, and anybody can fix it. The Admiral looked at all the human equipment. None of it was as beautiful or sophisticated as Zephyrian technology, but all of it worked better in practical situations. The humans had not tried to impress anyone. They had simply built things that did their jobs well. Your technology is so primitive, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Maybe, Dr. Park said with a smile, but it works. And when it breaks, we can fix it with stuff we buy at the local store. Can you say the same about your equipment? Admiral Crickstall looked at the piece of duct tape that was still holding his shield generator together. He realized that the Zephyrian Empire's greatest strength might also be its greatest weakness. They had spent so much time making things perfect that they had forgotten to make them practical. Perhaps, he said slowly, we could learn from each other. Now you're talking, Carlos said, wiping his hands on a rag. Want to see what we can do with a roll of duct tape and a box of spare parts? The Admiral was not sure he was ready for that, but he nodded anyway. He was beginning to understand that humans were much more dangerous than he had thought, and not in the way he had expected. General Patricia Hayes stood on the observation deck overlooking the training grounds at Fort Bragg. Below her, 2 teams were preparing for what was supposed to be a simple military exercise. On one side were 6 Zephyrian warriors in their advanced combat armor. On the other side were 6 human soldiers in standard military gear. The general had agreed to this demonstration because Admiral Crickstall insisted that despite their impressive technology, the Zephyrian military was still superior in actual combat. Your warriors look very impressive, General Hayes said to Admiral Crickstall, who stood beside her watching the preparations. The Zephyrian soldiers were 7 feet tall and wore armor that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. Their weapons glowed with energy, and their helmets had built-in displays that showed them detailed information about their surroundings. They are the finest warriors in the galaxy, Admiral Crickstall replied proudly. Each one has trained for decades in the art of honorable combat. They have never been defeated in battle. General Hayes nodded and looked at the human team. Sergeant Jake Thompson was checking his equipment, which looked very basic compared to the alien gear. His squad carried regular rifles, wore standard body armor, and had backpacks full of what looked like camping supplies. Private Nicole Adams was painting her face with green and brown camouflage paint. Corporal Ryan Foster was studying a map of the training area while eating a sandwich. This will be a good learning experience for both sides, General Hayes said diplomatically. The exercise was simple. Both teams would start at opposite ends of a 10-square-mile training area that included forests, hills, and a small abandoned town. The goal was to capture the other team's flag, which was located at their starting position. The team that brought back the enemy flag first would win. Admiral Krickstall activated his communication device. Warriors of the Empire, show these humans how real soldiers fight. Bring honor to the Zephyrian name. The Zephyrian team leader, Commander Vexkin, responded immediately. It will be done, Admiral. We shall crush these primitive warriors quickly and decisively. General Hayes picked up her radio. Jake, you and your people ready down there? Ready as we'll ever be, General, Sergeant Thompson replied. Should be fun. The exercise began at dawn. The Zephyrian warriors moved out in perfect formation, their armor gleaming in the morning sun. They advanced directly toward the human position, confident that their superior technology would give them an easy victory. Their armor protected them from most weapons. Their energy shields could stop bullets, and their advanced sensors could detect enemies from miles away. For the first hour, everything went according to the Zephyrian plan. Their sensors showed the human team moving through the forest about 2 miles away. Commander Vexkin led his warriors in a direct assault, expecting to overrun the human position within minutes. Then the problem started. The first sign of trouble came when Private Adams appeared on a hillside about 500 yards away. She was completely visible and seemed to be alone. The Zephyrians immediately focused their attention on her, raising their weapons to attack. Wait, Commander Vexkin ordered. This is too easy. It must be a trap. But their sensors showed only one human. Adams waved at them cheerfully and then disappeared behind the hill. The Zephyrians advanced carefully, expecting an ambush. What they found instead was a mannequin dressed in human military gear. It had been positioned to look like a person from a distance. While they were investigating the dummy, smoke grenades went off all around them. The forest filled with thick gray smoke that blocked their vision and confused their sensors. Sensors are not working properly, one of the Zephyrian warriors reported. The smoke is interfering with our equipment. Use your training, Commander. Vexkin ordered. Form a defensive circle and wait for the smoke to clear. But the smoke did not clear. Instead, it got thicker. The humans had set up multiple smoke machines throughout the area, creating a wall of gray fog that made it impossible to see more than a few feet in any direction. Then the psychological warfare began. Speakers hidden in the trees started playing recordings of human voices. Some were calling for help, others were giving military orders, and some were just making random noises. The Zephyrians could not tell which sounds were real and which were recordings. Contact left, one warrior called out, firing his plasma weapon at a shadow in the smoke. Contact right, another shouted, shooting at a different shadow, but there was no contact. The shadows were just pieces of cloth hanging from trees, moving in the wind. The humans had created dozens of fake targets throughout the area. Commander Vexkin tried to regain control. Stop firing at shadows. Stay in formation and move toward the objective. But staying in formation was impossible. The humans had stretched thin cables between trees at ankle height. The Zephyrian warriors, who were used to fighting in open space, kept tripping over the nearly invisible wires. Their heavy armor made it hard to get back up quickly, while the aliens stumbled around in the smoke. Corporal Foster was crawling through the tall grass toward their starting position. He had covered himself with a camouflage net that made him look like a bush. The Zephyrian sensors were designed to detect energy signatures and metal. Not a person covered in cloth and leaves. Foster reached the Zephyrian flag and carefully removed it from its pole. Then he began the long crawl back to his own team's position. Meanwhile, the Zephyrian warriors were still lost in the smoke. They had become separated from each other and were calling out, trying to regroup. This was exactly what Sergeant Thompson had hoped for. "Nicole, you're up," he whispered into his radio. Private Adams had been waiting in a tree about 50 feet away. She dropped down silently behind one of the confused Zephyrian warriors and tapped him on the shoulder. When he turned around, she was holding a white flag. Bang, you're dead, she said cheerfully. The warrior looked confused. What? I just killed you with a knife, Adams explained. In a real fight, you'd be dead right now, the warrior protested. But I am wearing armor. Your primitive blade cannot penetrate Zephyrian battle armor. Maybe not, Adams said, but I wasn't aiming for your armor. I was aiming for the gaps where your armor connects. Every suit of armor has weak points. She showed him a training knife, with harmless red paint on the tip. See, I got you right in the neck joint. Game over. The same thing happened to 3 more Zephyrian warriors. They were so focused on looking for enemies at a distance that they never noticed the humans getting close to them. The human soldiers used every trick they knew. They hid in trees, under logs, and in tall grass. They moved when the aliens were distracted and stayed perfectly still when the aliens were looking in their direction. Commander, Vexkin finally realized what was happening. They are not fighting honorably, he complained into his radio. They are using tricks and deception. That's kind of the point, Sergeant Thompson replied. He had been listening to the Zephyrian communications frequency. In a real war, there's no such thing as fighting fair. You do whatever it takes to win. But this is not how warriors behave, Commander Vexkin protested. We're not warriors, Thompson said. We're soldiers. There's a difference. The final blow came when the Zephyrians tried to use their advanced technology to even the odds. They activated their energy shields and began firing their plasma weapons at anything that moved. But the humans had prepared for this too. Corporal Foster had left small mirrors throughout the forest. When the plasma beams hit the mirrors, they reflected in unexpected directions. The Zephyrians ended up shooting at their own reflections, thinking they were enemy soldiers. This is madness, Commander Vexkin said. How can we fight enemies we cannot see? Easy, came a voice from directly behind him. He turned around to find Sergeant Thompson standing there with a big smile on his face. You don't fight us, you join us. What do you mean? The commander asked. Thompson held up a white flag. I mean you surrender. My guy already got your flag 10 minutes ago. Game over. The Zephyrian warriors looked around in confusion. They had been so busy dealing with smoke, mirrors, and fake targets that they had not noticed Corporal Foster completing his mission. Admiral Crickstall watched the whole thing from the observation deck. His mighty warriors had been completely outmaneuvered by humans using nothing but basic tactics and improvised equipment. The humans had not tried to match Zephyrian technology. Instead, they had used the aliens' reliance on technology against them. How? He asked General Hayes. Simple, she replied. Your people fight the way they think war should be fought. Our people fight the way war actually is fought. There's a big difference. The Admiral looked at his defeated warriors, who were still trying to understand what had happened to them. Perhaps we have much to learn from humans after all. Perhaps you do, General Hayes agreed. But don't worry. We're good teachers. The Zephyrian High Council chamber was the most impressive room in their empire. It was built from black stone that came from their homeworld, and the walls were covered with gold symbols that told the story of their conquests. 12 high-ranking Zephyrians sat around a circular table that was made from a single piece of crystal. They had called this emergency meeting to decide what to do about the humans. Admiral Crickstall stood in the center of the circle, feeling less confident than he had in his entire career. Honored council members, he began, I must report that the humans are not what we expected. Council leader Zeftra, an ancient Zephyrian whose scales had turned silver with age, spoke first. Explain this failure, Admiral. You were sent to conquer a primitive world. Instead, you return with stories of defeat and humiliation. The humans did not fight as other species fight, Admiral Crickstall explained. They use tactics we have never encountered. They turn our own technology against us. They do not follow the rules of civilized warfare. Then we will destroy them, Councilmember Vexora declared. If they will not surrender, we will eliminate them completely. But Council Leader Zeftra was wiser than the others. Wait, she sighed. If these humans defeated our warriors and confused our technology, perhaps we should learn from them instead of destroying them. The Empire could benefit from their unusual methods. You suggest we ally with them? Another council member asked in surprise. I suggest we negotiate, Zephyr replied. If we can understand how humans think, we can use their tactics to conquer other worlds more easily. So it was decided. The Zephyrian Empire would send a diplomatic mission to Earth to negotiate a formal alliance. They would learn human tactics and teach the humans about advanced technology. It seemed like a perfect plan. 3 weeks later, Ambassador Victoria Stone walked into the conference room at the United Nations building in New York. She was a career diplomat who had negotiated treaties with dozens of countries. She was known for being calm, professional, and very good at getting what she wanted. Today, she was carrying a small basket and wearing a friendly smile. Across the table sat 5 members of the Zephyrian High Council, including Admiral Crixtal and Council Leader Zeftra. They were wearing their most formal robes and had brought translation devices to make sure nothing was lost in communication. "Welcome to Earth," Ambassador Stone said cheerfully. "I brought cookies." She opened her basket and offered homemade chocolate chip cookies to the aliens. The Zephyrians looked at the cookies with suspicion. They had never seen anything like them before. "What are these objects?" Council Leader Zeftra asked. "Cookies," Ambassador Stone replied. "They're sweet. You eat them. It's a human tradition to share food during meetings." Admiral Crixtal picked up one of the cookies and examined it carefully. "This could be a weapon," he said to the other council members in their own language. "I don't think they're trying to poison us with cookies," Zeftra replied, also in Zephyrian. "But she activated her personal scanner to analyze the food anyway." Ambassador Stone waited patiently while the aliens spent 20 minutes running tests on the cookies. They used chemical analyzers, biological scanners, and even called their ship to run additional tests. Finally, they determined that the cookies were safe to eat. "These are pleasant," Zeftra admitted after taking a small bite. "Sweet foods are rare in our culture." "I'm glad you like them," Ambassador Stone said. "Now, shall we discuss this alliance?" Dr. Matthew Clark, who was serving as a cultural advisor, sat beside Ambassador Stone. He had been studying Zephyrian culture for weeks, preparing for this meeting. "Before we begin," he said, "I think it's important that you understand something about human nature." "What is that?" Admiral Crixtal asked. "We have a law," Dr. Clark explained. "We call it Murphy's Law. It says that if something can go wrong, it will go wrong." The Zephyrians looked confused. "This is an actual law in your legal system?" Zeftra asked. "No, it's more like a rule of life," Dr. Clark said. "It means that humans always plan for things to break, fail, or go in unexpected directions. We assume that our best plans will have problems. This is a very pessimistic way to view existence," one of the council members observed. "Actually, it's optimistic," Ambassador Stone said. "Because when we expect things to go wrong, we're ready for it. And when things go right, we're pleasantly surprised." To demonstrate this point, the lights in the conference room suddenly went out. The Zephyrians immediately began to panic, thinking they were under attack. But Ambassador Stone simply reached into her bag and pulled out a flashlight. "See," she said, lighting up the room, "always be prepared." The lights came back on a few seconds later. It had just been a routine power fluctuation, but the difference in reactions was obvious. The humans had calmly dealt with the problem while the aliens had assumed the worst. "Interesting," Zeftra said. "Your people planned for failure." "We plan for everything," Ambassador Stone replied. "Which brings us to these negotiations. I assume you want to create some kind of formal alliance?" "Correct," Admiral Crixtal said. "The Zephyrian Empire wishes to learn human military tactics in exchange for advanced technology," Ambassador Stone smiled. "That sounds reasonable. Should we make it interesting?" "What do you mean?" Zeftra asked. Ambassador Stone pulled out a deck of cards. "How about we negotiate while playing a game? It's called poker. It will help you understand how humans think." The Zephyrians had never heard of poker, but they agreed to learn. Ambassador Stone explained the rules, which seemed simple enough. Each player got 5 cards and tried to make the best combination. The player with the best hand won the round. What the aliens did not understand was that poker was not really about the cards. It was about reading people, bluffing, and psychological strategy. Ambassador Stone had been playing poker since she was a child. The first few hands went normally. The Zephyrians played their cards honestly, showing their emotions clearly on their faces. When they had good cards, they became excited. When they had bad cards, they looked disappointed. Ambassador Stone, meanwhile, kept the same calm expression no matter what cards she had. She watched the aliens carefully, learning to read their body language and facial expressions. "I have 3 of a kind," Admiral Crystal announced proudly during the 4th hand. "That is a good combination, yes?" "Very good," Ambassador Stone said. "I'll see your bet and raise you." She pushed more chips into the center of the table. The Admiral looked confused. If he had a good hand, why was she betting more money? "Perhaps you did not hear me correctly," the Admiral said. "I have 3 of a kind. I heard you," Ambassador Stone replied calmly. "Do you want to call my bet or fold?" The Admiral looked at his cards again, then at Ambassador Stone's face. She gave no hint about what cards she might have. Finally, he decided to call her bet. Ambassador Stone laid down her cards. She had a pair of 2s. It was a terrible hand, much worse than the Admiral's 3 of a kind. But she had won the round anyway because the Admiral had folded. "I do not understand," Admiral Crystal said. "You had bad cards, but you bet as if you had good cards." "That's called bluffing," Ambassador Stone explained. "Sometimes the best strategy is to make people think you have something you don't actually have." Dr. Clark leaned forward. "This is another important thing about humans. We don't always tell the truth during negotiations. Not because we're dishonest, but because misdirection can be a useful tool." The Zephyrians looked shocked. "You admit to deception?" "We admit to strategy," Ambassador Stone said. "The goal is to get the best outcome for your side. Sometimes that means being creative with the truth." As the poker game continued, Ambassador Stone began incorporating the negotiation into the betting. "I'll bet our advanced medical research against your faster-than-light communication technology," she said during one hand. "You cannot bet real things?" Zephyr protested. "Why not?" Ambassador Stone asked. "This is just another form of negotiation. Instead of arguing for hours about exchange rates and treaty terms, we let the cards decide." By the end of the evening, Ambassador Stone had won most of the poker hands and, more importantly, had negotiated extremely favorable terms for Earth. The humans would provide military consulting services to the Zephyrian Empire in exchange for access to alien technology, territorial rights to 3 uninhabited star systems, and a formal declaration that Earth was under Zephyrian protection. "I still do not understand how you won so many hands with inferior cards," Admiral Crystal said as they prepared to leave. "Simple," Ambassador Stone replied. "You played the cards you were dealt. I played the people across the table from me." Council. Leader Zeftra looked thoughtful. "Humans are more complex than we realized." "We're not complex," Dr. Clark said. "We're just unpredictable. We do whatever works, even if it doesn't make sense to other people." "Especially if it doesn't make sense to other people," Ambassador Stone added with a smile. As the Zephyrians left the building, they realized they had just agreed to pay Earth for advice on how to be more like humans. Somehow, the humans had convinced them that learning to be unpredictable was worth 3 star systems and a military alliance. Admiral Crystal shook his head in amazement. "These humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy." "Dangerous?" Zeftra asked. "They just convinced us to pay them for teak." 6 months after the poker game in New York, Admiral Crystal stood on the bridge of his flagship wearing something that would have shocked his ancestors. On his head was a blue baseball cap with the words Earth Military Academy written in white letters. The cap had been a gift from Lieutenant Colonel Ben Morris, who was now serving as his chief tactical advisor. "Admiral," Commander Vexkin reported, "we have reached the Cronin hegemony border. Their fleet is waiting for us in battle formation." Admiral Crystal looked at the tactical display. The Krona ships were arranged in perfect lines, just as military. doctrine required, they looked impressive and organized. 6 months ago, he would have been worried about facing such a disciplined enemy force. Now he just smiled. Then, he called to Lieutenant Colonel Morris, who was sitting at a console covered with what looked like children's toys. "What do you think?" Morris looked up from his inflatable balloon animals and grinned. "I think the Cronans are about to learn why you don't fight humans the way you fight everyone else. Are the decoys ready?" "Decoys are in position," reported Dr. Susan Lee from her station. She had been working with the Zephyrian engineers for months, teaching them the fine art of making things that looked real but were actually fake. "We have 47 inflatable ships ready to deploy." "Excellent," Morris said. "Crystal, remember what we practiced. The key to human-style warfare is making the enemy confused about what's real and what isn't." Admiral Crickstall activated the fleet communications. "All ships, this is the Admiral. Begin Operation Rubber Duck." The Zephyrian fleet suddenly seemed to double in size as dozens of inflatable ships deployed around them. From a distance, the fake ships looked exactly like real Zephyrian warships. They had lights, they moved like real ships, and they even showed up on enemy sensors as metal objects. The Cronan fleet commander, Admiral Vekanar, watched in confusion as his enemy's force suddenly grew much larger. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Our intelligence said they only had 20 ships." "Perhaps they received reinforcements," his tactical officer suggested. Meanwhile, the real Zephyrian ships began broadcasting fake radio messages. Morris had taught them to create dozens of different conversations that would make the enemy think they were listening to real military communications. "Eco Squadron, move to attack position," came one transmission. "Bravo Fleet, prepare for flanking." "Maneuver," came another. "Delta Wing, initiate Operation Thunderbolt," came a third. None of these units actually existed, but the Cronans did not know that. They began repositioning their ships to defend against attacks that were never coming. "Sir," the Cronan communications officer reported, "we're picking up transmissions from at least 12 different Zephyrian squadrons. They must have brought their entire fleet." Admiral Vekanar felt the first touch of doubt. He had been expecting to fight 20 ships, not 60 or 70. But he was a proud military officer, and he would not retreat without a fight. "All ships prepare to engage the enemy," he ordered. That was when the second part of the human plan began. Hidden speakers throughout the Cronan fleet began playing strange sounds. Some were recordings of human laughter. Others were creepy music from horror movies. Some were just random noises that made no sense at all. "What is that sound?" Admiral Vekanar demanded. His communications officer looked confused. "Sir, it appears to be coming from inside our own ships." This was impossible, of course. The sounds were actually being broadcast from tiny transmitters that Lieutenant Colonel Morris had somehow attached to the Cronan ships during a diplomatic visit the week before. The Cronans never found the transmitters because they were hidden inside fake inspection reports that looked completely official. "Sir," the tactical officer reported nervously, "our computer systems are acting strange. Half of our weapons are REPORTNG error messages." The weapons were not actually broken. Dr. Lee had taught the Zephyrians how to hack enemy computer systems and display fake error messages. The Cronan weapons worked perfectly, but their crews thought they were malfunctioning. "This is sabotage," Admiral Vekanar declared. "The enemy has infiltrated our fleet somehow." He was right, but not in the way he thought. The infiltration had happened weeks earlier through what appeared to be routine diplomatic contact. The humans had taught the Zephyrians that the best time to plant surveillance devices and computer viruses was when the enemy invited you over for a friendly chat, the final phase of Operation Rubber Duck began when the Zephyrian fleet started to retreat. The ships pulled back in what looked like a panicked withdrawal, leaving behind several damaged vessels that were actually more inflatable decoys. "They're running," Admiral Vekanar said with satisfaction. "All ships, pursue the enemy fleet." The Cronan ships charged forward, eager to catch the retreating Zephyrians. They spread out to surround the damaged ships, planning to capture them. That was exactly what Morris had hoped they would do. Now, Admiral Crickstall ordered quietly. The Zephyrian fleet, which had been hiding behind a nearby moon, suddenly appeared, behind the scattered Cronin forces. The retreat had been fake, designed to make the enemy spread out and become vulnerable. Impossible, Admiral Decanar gasped as he realized he had been tricked. His ships were scattered across several light years, chasing inflatable decoys. The real Zephyrian fleet was now positioned perfectly to attack his divided forces. Admiral Decanar, came a transmission from Admiral Crickstall. This is Admiral Crickstall of the Zephyrian Empire. Your fleet is surrounded and divided. I suggest you surrender before things get unpleasant. Never, Admiral Decanar replied. The Cronin hegemony does not surrender to trickery and deception. Suit yourself, Admiral Crickstall said. Then he did something that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. He laughed. The battle that followed was over in less than an hour. The scattered Cronin ships could not coordinate their defense. Every time they tried to regroup, they discovered that some of their allies were actually inflatable decoys. Their weapons misfired because of the fake error messages. Their communications were jammed by recordings of Earth music, including a particularly annoying song called Baby Shark that Lieutenant Colonel Morris had insisted would drive any intelligent species crazy when the smoke cleared. The entire Cronin fleet had surrendered. Not a single Zephyrian ship had been seriously damaged. How? Admiral Decanar asked when he was brought aboard the Zephyrian flagship. How did you defeat a superior force with such tactics? We learned from humans, Admiral Crickstall explained. Proudly, they taught us that winning is more important than looking impressive while you do it. Lieutenant Colonel Morris walked over and offered Admiral Decanar a baseball cap just like the one Admiral Crickstall was wearing. Welcome to the new Galactic Order, he said cheerfully. Would you like to learn some human tactics, too? Admiral. Decanar looked at the cap, then at the Zephyrian Admiral who was wearing human clothing and using human expressions. What have humans done to you? They made us better, Admiral Crickstall replied. We used to conquer through superior technology. Now we win through superior thinking. Dr. Lee, who had been watching the conversation, made a note in her report. The Human Zephyrian Technology Institute now had 300 alien students learning human engineering principles. The most popular course was called If It's Stupid, But It Works, It's Not Stupid, which taught aliens how to solve problems using whatever materials they had available. Meanwhile, Captain Tony Rodriguez was teaching a class called Flexible Leadership to alien military officers. His students were learning human concepts like adapting to changing conditions and thinking outside the box. The class motto, which was printed on all their training materials, was Semper Gumby, always flexible. You know, Admiral Crickstall said to Morris as they watched the last Cronin ship surrender, 6 months ago I came to your planet planning to conquer it. Now I wear your clothes, use your tactics, and think like you do. How did this happen? Morris thought about it for a moment. I think it happened because you were smart enough to recognize that being stronger isn't the same as being better. Humans aren't the strongest species in the galaxy or the smartest or the most advanced. But we're really good at figuring out how to win anyway. And now we are too, Admiral Crickstall said with satisfaction. Now you are too, Morris agreed. Across the galaxy, other species were beginning to notice that the Zephyrian Empire had changed. Their tactics were no longer predictable. Their strategies made no sense until they worked perfectly. Their military leaders wore strange hats and used expressions that no universal translator could properly interpret. Most importantly, they were winning every battle not through superior firepower, but through superior unpredictability. Earth, meanwhile, had become the most popular destination for military education in the galaxy. Alien species sent their brightest officers to learn human tactics, human engineering, and human thinking. The humans, for their part, were happy to teach anyone who asked. After all, as Ambassador Stone had learned during her poker game with Zephyrians, sometimes the best way to get what you want is to convince other people that they want to be more like you. And if those people happen to pay you for the privilege of learning how to think like a human, well, that was just good. Business.